Want to learn how to turn your expenses into your greatest untapped asset? Keep listening to find out how. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friends. I'm Dr. Lisha Taylor.
And I'm Dr. Brittne Halford.
And of course, we're here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time. But first, here's a word from our partner.
Hey, Lisha, one of the most important financial tasks we do as doctors is protect ourselves, which means getting the right insurance. I recall purchasing my insurance policy just a few days before I graduated from residency. What was your experience?
So I got my insurance when I graduated from medical school right before I started residency. I actually called a few agents, but I had the best service from Pradeep Auto at PKA Insurance Group. He was super responsive and personable. Unlike some of the other agents, Pradeep actually got me quotes from all the major companies and actually took the time to explain the nuances in each of their policies. What I love most is that he wasn't just this way for me. Whenever I would send one of my friends to him, he would not only speak to them, but he'd also let them know where to go or who to contact if there were better options or discounts available.
At PKA Insurance Group, Pradeep Auto and Matthew Peterson are independent brokers focusing on disability and life insurance. They excel in securing coverage for physicians and other medical professionals. Discounts on disability insurance can range from 10 to 40% depending on your situation. And there is now an A+ rated carrier offering up to $10 million of life insurance without lapse. If you are very healthy with limited to no medical issues, approval is likely in 5 minutes. Reach out to PKA Insurance to discuss your disability or life insurance needs at www.pkainsurance.com or call 1-800-258-1018.
Hey, money best friend, we want to hear from you.
That's right. We need to know a little about you to improve this podcast and ensure we give you the best content possible.
Are you a wealth-minded doctor like us navigating the challenges of money and medicine, or are you in a totally different field?
Are you in your early 30s like me or a bit older like Brittne?
Hey, I'm not that old. If you wouldn't mind, head over to the podcast show notes, click the link for the survey, and kindly fill out this super short 6-question survey.
Based on your answers, we will tailor the podcast to fit your needs. Thanks in advance for filling it out, and don't forget to leave a review.
We appreciate you.
All right, we're going to kick things off with our Life is Lifing segment as per usual. Brittne, what is going on in your world?
Oh my gosh, Lisha, I can't believe that it's starting to feel like summer here. I know in Atlanta it gets hot really early in the spring, but it's finally starting to feel like summer here. And I just want to get a pulse on what's going on. Are you pulling out the swimsuits? Are you planning for trips? Like, what's going on in your world?
So I have not yet pulled out the swimsuit, but I can tell you that my neighbors have. So I live in an apartment building and I live like on the 5th floor and I can look out and see the pool. And initially I thought that was going to be fantastic, right? I can look out my window and see people enjoying the pool. And now I've just realized that was the worst decision ever because I just hear kids playing all day and screaming and like blasting music. And I'm like, wow, sounds like they're having a great time. But also I'm trying to work. Sometimes I work from home and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I think I was talking to you the other day and I was like, look, I can't record anything because somebody's kid is literally dying outside right now and I can hear it. So I haven't pulled out the swimsuits yet. I will soon because everybody else in my apartment building appears to be having a great time. But what I am doing in my life is actually planning my trip to Madrid. So I think before I had mentioned that I was going to France for a wedding, the south of France specifically, which I know sounds very fancy. I've been looking forward to this for so long that my friends think I'm the one that's actually getting married. They keep talking about it, but it is not my wedding. It is one of my friends' weddings. And as a part of that trip, I think I mentioned that I was going to go to Spain too, because Spain is not that far from the south of France. And so I've been thinking recently about what am I going to do when I am in Spain? And so I thought, well, I kind of want to see the city. So I'm going to do some sort of city tour, I think. And then Spain is known, or I think one of the things that they're known for is like their flamingo dancing. And so I'm going to see like a flamingo show. And then, I love wine. So I'm going to like do the sort of like wine tour thing. And I'm so excited. If you couldn't tell, the hotel that I'm staying at, which I booked on points, by the way, because how else am I going to book a hotel? Because you know me. So I booked this hotel on points. It's in the middle of the city of Madrid. And apparently it's walkable to a lot of really cool things. And so I'm just, if you couldn't tell by my voice, I am very excited about this new trip that I am planning, or I guess this trip that I've been planning for a while. And now I have a little bit more details on what I'm going to do. So I will have to, take lots of photos and videos for you, but I'm very excited about that.
I love this. I've never been to France, but I've been to Spain. People, if you all don't know, I love Latin culture. I speak Spanish. And so a little bit of me wanted to like correct your Spanish.
Oh, please, please. How am I supposed to say? I want to sound like I'm like cultured. Correct me.
Flamenco, flamenco.
I saw it spelled that way, Brittany, and I was like, maybe typo. Apparently not. I am the one in the wrong. Go figure. Can you say it again for me?
Flamenco.
Flamenco?
I did flamenco dancing when I was in college. So this is a segue. But when I was an undergraduate at the University of Michigan, go blue, I was part of E Squad. If there are any like U of M people listening, then they probably think I'm very awkward because it has this residential college where you have this intensive language immersion training. And that's where I learned to speak Spanish. And so I really just like dived headfirst into the culture. And I took flamenco dancing for maybe about 6 months. I had the shoes and the outfits and everything. I love to dance. So I've done like many types of dance lessons in various cultures. So
I need a video of this. I would not, let me tell you, as someone who knows you, I wouldn't have been like, oh, she knows how to flamenco dance, but apparently you do. So I need video footage of this. We need video footage of this.
let me see. I'll have to ask my friend Kate. I did it in undergraduate. It's not that long ago, but it's quite long ago. So I'll have to take a look to see if I can find anything. But yeah, it was very fun. It was very fun. So I hope you enjoy the wine, enjoy all of it. If you can make way to Barcelona, I don't know. I think Barcelona is beautiful and absolutely my favorite city.
What do you got going on while I'm going to Spain?
Well, I'm also doing like some fancy things. I'm not traveling, but recently there have been many galas. My husband sits on a board of an organization and he was invited as a keynote speaker for a recent gala called Raising a Reader. And Lisha, I haven't seen my husband speak probably since maybe residency when he was a resident. And just sitting there watching him, he did a fantastic job. He, shared a little bit about his story to build trust. He had humor. He shared data. He drew in why people should donate to this organization because it was all about self expression. And when you give children the language to express themselves, then they can do that and hopefully decrease depression, decrease anxiety, and all of the other mental health. And so it's May, in which, we're recording this episode and this gala was. And so that ties in with Mental Health Awareness Month. Everybody was so pleased. They gave him so many like pats on the back, attaboys, as my mom would say. And the CEO, she just had the biggest smile. She was so grateful. So that has been very rewarding for me to just sit here. I know he speaks a lot because he's like always moving and dressing up and, looking fine walking out the door. But to sit there and witness and have a first row seat at just what he does and how well he was able to communicate and really help this organization who does fantastic work in building the literacy of communities who typically have low literacy was really phenomenal to witness.
I am really happy for you and your husband. And also, as I'm listening to you share this, because I'm looking at you, I just see the like appreciation and the love on your face and how genuinely proud of your husband you seem. And I think that even though he may not listen to this podcast, he should listen to this one because I bet that he would love to see how much you seem to adore him. Like, this is so cute. I'm looking at your face. You look like a proud mom right now as you're like talking about how great he did. Like, I'm sure he'd love to hear that, which I'm sure, I mean, you probably tell him this all the time. But first of all, you seem like you're really attracted to him, which is a great thing, right? Because you're married to him. It also seems like you're proud of him. You're in awe of him. You respect him. Like, I'm sure that he would love to hear and see what I am hearing and saying right now. But I'm very happy for him. I'm happy that he did a great job.
Thank you, Lisha. Thank you. Yeah, I do love him. We've been married for nearly a decade, and I may not always express this level of appreciation. Lisha, so I would like to learn what's going on in your finances and your pocketbook, as my grandmother would say.
Oh my goodness. Well, right now it's like what's happening in my digital wallet, right? Because, we've been doing these episodes on credit card hacks, and I'm super excited about this phase of my life where I get to basically turn my expenses into assets. And the way that I've been doing that is by basically putting a lot of my spend, so anything that I purchase, I've been putting it on credit cards, and I have several different credit cards to take advantage of different bonus categories, right? So one credit card I may use specifically for travel and another credit card I may use for food and things like that. So anyway, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because although this has helped me maximize a lot of credit card points, one of the things that I need to be a little bit more intentional about is keeping track of what I'm spending. So because all of the spend that I have doesn't go on one particular card, right? It's spread out among different cards so I can take advantage of these different bonus categories. I've realized that I've actually sort of overspent in some ways because maybe I spent a little bit more on dining out than I realized because it's on a different card. Or maybe I spent a little bit more on travel than I anticipated because, again, it's on a different card. And a part of this is like me also trying to separate out like work expenses versus personal expenses because I'm having to pay in advance for various conferences, and this really comes to a head. I noticed this before when I was doing like the solo trip. So I decided that I was going to see some of my friends from medical school, and one of them lived in Seattle at the time. She's since moved, but she lived in Seattle. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to visit her in Seattle, and then I'm going to visit my other friend in Chicago. This was like a couple of years ago. And that trip was fun, but it ended up costing so much more than I realized. I don't know about you, but I have this in my head of like, if I'm going somewhere internationally, I kind of know conceptually, like, okay, it's going to cost like a certain amount of money I need to be prepared for. But if I'm going somewhere like domestically, like flying to another state, for some reason in my mind, I'm like, oh, that should be cheap. That should be affordable. And I'm like, oh, as I'm looking like how much I'm spending on Ubers or like the fact that I have to eat out every meal because I'm like in a different location, I'm realizing how expensive that was. And like, even though I was meeting my friends there, like there are some expenses that I saved because I was staying with my friends, but there's other expenses that just fell on me because I wasn't traveling with someone, right? So I wasn't able to split the expense with another friend or with a significant other. And so I realized how expensive that was. I need to figure out how to budget for this better. And so my money mishap is overspending on credit cards. And, thankfully I'm in a financial position where I'm able to pay off the balance each month, but I'm still shocked at how big the balance is that I'm paying off. And I'm like, what's happened to you, Brittany? Maybe I'm being a little too transparent.
I appreciate the transparency. And I think that this happens to many of us. We talked about this in one of the earlier episodes when my husband and I went to Vegas. I was like, oh, we had a good time, but we might have to tap into some of these tax savings in order to pay this off, And I think, at least for me, Alicia, I'm going to be honest with you too. I think you might be a little bit more mindful of your spending than I am. I'm typically very frugal by nature. So I make choices based upon cost when they're not going to add significant value. And when I think about eating out, it really doesn't make a big difference for me whether I eat out or not. So I recently went to a conference and I went to CVS. It's like, okay, we about to buy some milk. Some cereal. But when my friends invited me out to dinner, I didn't say, no, I can't eat out. Like I'm going to have the cereal for lunch, dinner, and every meal. And so I allowed myself to have that latitude. I guess all of that to say that, yes, the spending is important. When you travel, I think there's just a lower threshold for us to say yes, because we're with people that we often don't see in environments that we often don't travel to. And somehow we just have to cushion our expenses a bit for anticipation of overspending.
As physicians, one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that we secure our income because a lot of our financial plans are contingent on our high doctor income. One of the things that you will need to do is make sure that you get long-term disability insurance.
Now, Pradeep and his team at PKA Insurance Group have a reputation for putting people over profits and always doing what's best. Do not hesitate to email PKA Insurance and his team today.
They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve.
Lisha, do you remember that day when you paid the last penny on your credit card debt and car loan?
Yeah, it just felt so heavy and so constricting. And when I finally did pay it off, it was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders because I knew that next month I was going to have so much extra cash flow.
That same narrative is something that is echoed by a lot of the clients I have helped to pay off their debt. And I recall receiving that letter in the mail from Sapphire. It said, congratulations, your loan is paid in full.
If you can identify with our story, we've got a product or a solution for you.
We've created the Debt Payoff Bootcamp, which includes the joyfully free accelerator that helps you get control over that consumer debt, those car loans, without sacrificing joy, and it includes student loans made simple.
Yep, that's right. Student loans can be complicated, but don't worry, I've got you covered. In this Student Loans Made Simple series, we give you the high yield information that you need to create the plan that's right for you.
We have the tools, the strategies included in this debt payoff course that's going to get you to financial freedom.
Head over to wealthmindedmd.com and click the link to our Debt Payoff Bootcamp to start your transformation today. Now that I'm thinking back about that solo trip and then just also recently, I've been like, okay, and this is a little bit of a financial focus too, in terms of some of the ways and some of the things that I plan to implement in order to save money when it comes to travel. And one of those is saving in advance. Right. And so having a certain amount of money deducted each month when I get paid that I put into what I now call like a travel fund,
Mm-hmm.
so that when I'm traveling, I'm not having to cash flow it every month and then getting nervous and waiting until I get paid again. But I've got like a stash of cash that I can use to, fund those expenses. And then also doing one of the things that my friend actually does. So we were having like a girls' brunch. I invited her over and she was talking to me about how she got another job. And I was like, girl, you don't need another job. You make a lot. She's an emergency medicine physician. And so she was like, well, Lisha, in our field, like I just want more job security in case where I work loses this current contract with this hospital. I have another sort of place where I can work. And she talked about how she occasionally does some urgent care shifts. And I was like, why are you doing that? And she was like, well, I use my main job to sort of take care of my big financial tasks. So I use the payment from my main job to pay my bills, pay, her mortgage, pay down her student loans, those sorts of things. And she says she uses the urgent care shifts when she wants to pay for her travel. And so if ever
Mm.
she is planning a trip, she will preemptively tell the locums company that she wants to work, one day that month or 2 days that month. And then she'll use the money that she got from those added shifts to then fund her travel. And so for her, she knows, okay, if I'm planning a trip, I'm going to need to work extra in order to fund that trip. And so then she doesn't feel as guilty when she's on the trip. She doesn't have to worry about not having the money for it. And so it gives her a little bit more leeway and flexibility. And I thought, man, you know what? I might think about doing the same thing. Now, there are tons of different ways that people can make side income, and it may not always include working extra shifts. But I did like sort of the sentiment behind it, which was I'm going to work extra to fund my travel so that I can still enjoy my life without compromising my financial goals.
Yeah. So I'll just comment on this very briefly. Yesterday, I gave a talk to basically it's like the Black men's group here at Harvard Medical School. That's where, we work for Harvard.
Okay, hold on. I was waiting for her to drop it in the podcast, one of these episodes, because I wasn't sure she was going to say where she worked. But did y'all catch that? Because my co-host like amazing, and she works for Harvard. Life flex.
All right. So let's get back to it. So, yeah. So I was talking to them about financial wellness, right? And my husband, of course, is a Black man and he also works for Harvard. So he was there.
Power couple. Power couple. Oh my goodness. I mean, the bar has said hi. You and your husband are killing it. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna stop interrupting you. Keep going.
All right. So he interjected that I was talking about how simple money can be as far as the equation. It's like your income minus your expenses equals your opportunity, how much you're able to put away for retirement, how much you'll have left in the bank for travel and things of that nature. And he mentioned that he loves luxury. If he's going to do something, so if we're going to go to a basketball game, he wants to sit in the front row. If we're going to fly, now, on occasion we fly first class depending on the circumstances. And he said that I used to basically just pick up shifts like, oh, I want to do this. Let me just pick up a shift to do that, to fund that. And then he reflected on that and said, well, I realized that there was an opportunity cost there that I was sacrificing in order to do that. So that's just like part of the analysis that we talked about with life is life and healthcare hustle. Yes, you can pick up an extra shift. It's so easy for us to do more because there's always a need and we're higher income. But then at some point, at least for my husband, what he shared was he realized that picking up these extra shifts didn't actually serve him as much because of the family dynamics and all of that. And so you might see that like one way of doing something will serve you at certain point of your time. And then you might reflect on that and feel that is no longer serving you and you have to make small shifts in order to accommodate. But you do what works for you at the time and the information that you have available and the resources that you have available and just give yourself grace, that, okay, this is working now. And if I want to do something differently later on, then there are opportunities to pivot and change.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you said. As you were talking, it was making me think of something that I'm almost done creating, which is a incubator program called Boost, where, I'm going to talk about different strategies to increase income. And working extra shifts, medical side gigs is one way, right? But there's other ways to do that. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time coaching other physicians on is some of those other ways that I can't wait to share with the world. But I like what you said in that for some people, working extra shifts may not be ideal. And sometimes it is very helpful to think about other ways that you could make money that don't require you to work in medicine or to leave your home. And so then, we talk about other ways as well. But I think for me and my friend in particular, she had so much job flexibility in terms of being an emergency medicine physician and not working 5 days a week, which I'm jealous of her schedule. She had so much extra time just like during the day and she really enjoyed it. And so for her, it worked. And I think the underlying sentiment though is that, you may want to find ways to save in advance for your travel or work extra in order to fund your travel. And one of the things that I'm super excited about is just coming up here in a couple of seconds, we have this interview with Dr. Devon Gimbel. And one of the things that I love about her is that she really teaches and coaches physicians on how to travel in luxury without paying a lot. Because there's one way to do it, which is work extra and pay for the luxury. There's another way to do it, which is saving in advance, which might take you a long time in order to afford the luxury. And then there's a third way, which is I think what Devon specializes in. It's realizing that maybe that luxury you desire doesn't cost as much as you think, especially if you were able to utilize credit card points. And so we are about to dive into our next segment. Okay, and now we are on to our Wealthy Insights segment with the wonderful, the amazing, the credit card points guru, Dr. Devon Gimbel. We are so happy and grateful for you joining us again today. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me here. I told you this last time we talked. I could talk about this topic for hours on end every single day of the week. So anytime you've got a little bit of time to spare, I am happy to come on and chat about all of these things with you.
Well, we are happy and we do have some time to spare. And we thought, since it's the summertime and folks are traveling and spending probably a little bit more money than they thought that they would be spending, that we should maybe give them some even more strategies when it comes to credit cards. But I just wanted to sort of set the room. So the last time that we spoke about this topic, we were talking about all of the amazing things that one could do with their credit cards. We talked about how you went on this amazing first class trip that we're all super jealous of, and how if you had paid cash for it, it would have cost like $1 gazillion, but you didn't because you're you and you were using credit card points, which we're also envious of. And so I just wanted to reset the room and just ask you if you could tell us again about some of your favorite points earning redemption trips that you've gone on and sort of give a plug for why we should consider using credit card points for travel.
Sure. So, I think that one of the best things I ever heard about finance and financial education is that personal finance is personal, right? Like there are certain tenets and philosophies that I think it's very useful for us all to learn about. But the way that my personal finance journey or my personal finance picture may look amazing for me is not necessarily the same for everyone else. And I say that because I think about travel in the exact same way. I think a lot of people could benefit tremendously from earning and using credit card points for travel. But the way that I have loved to use my points, that could be so different from the way that somebody else loves to use their points. But one of my personal favorite things to do with points is long haul premium travel. I spent the vast majority of my 20s and early 30s traveling really, really far in very, very uncomfortable conditions. Like I have spent, if you added it up, probably weeks of my life, on a long haul economy flight, crammed in tiny little window seat for 13 to 20 hours at a time. So, I have flown to East Africa, West Africa, India, Southeast Asia, South America. I've been everywhere in economy and it was not the most fun, experience, to be honest with you. The travel itself was amazing, but the getting there wasn't. And so for me, when I really dove into this world, my eye was on how can I make those long haul flights actually part of the trip, part of the journey, part of the experience, like not the thing you have to tolerate, then you can have an amazing travel experience. And so there's so much value that can be had from points, specifically in this category of long haul premium, meaning business or first class travel. The value you can get from your points is just so outsized in this area. So I'll just give you a quick example. I know that Lisha, you've been to South Africa and I actually flew to South Africa 2 years ago. I'm going back again in just a couple of weeks. And my favorite way to fly there is on Qatar, which is one of the kind of most highly regarded international carriers in the world. And they have this amazing business class product called the Q Suite. This was really groundbreaking and industry leading when they introduced it. And it's just an amazing experience to fly. And so the last time I went on my kind of outbound trip for this time, I'm going to be flying on Qatar Q Suites. And these are flights that, if you were going to book in cash, easily could be $7, $8, $9,000, especially for a one-way flight, but even for a round trip flight, which is, a lot of money. But instead, I can use points for that. And this is one of my favorite uses of points. You can book that specific flight with a couple of different types of points, but the one that I like to use is American Airlines miles. It's only 75,000 American Airlines miles one way to fly from where I live in Chicago through Qatar's hub in Doha down to Johannesburg, South Africa. So we're talking about, 24 hours probably of flight time and an amazing business class product for relatively few points. And just for context, I am also all the time planning other trips. I mean, other people have probably had this experience where they've gone online and they're thinking, oh, I have some Delta miles or I have some American Airlines miles. Let me see, where can this get me? How far can I go? And it's not unusual, especially, recently, the last year or two, flight prices are just so, so high in cash. People have probably gone on an American Airlines website trying to fly from Phoenix to Orlando. You could pay 75,000 points one way for an economy ticket, domestically very, very easily, which is great. It saves you money, but I don't think any of us are really lining up to fly economy, from Phoenix to Orlando and saying like, this is our premier, like travel dream come true. You can use, like I said, 75,000 American Airlines miles, which is relatively little. You can fly business class halfway around the world. Another great example just for American Airlines miles are one of my favorite currencies is that last year I flew to Tokyo, and on the way out, I flew from Chicago to Tokyo. It was a direct flight on Japan Airlines, which is just a phenomenal airline. And I didn't fly business class. I flew first class. So some of these international airlines actually have a class of service above business class. And that's what first class is on these long haul flights. And I flew first class from Chicago to Tokyo for 80,000 American Airlines miles. And that's a flight that can easily cost $14,000. It's just ridiculous, like how much value you can get from these points. And so those are two kind of extreme examples, but just incredible flight experiences, amazing value to get from points. But there are really so many different ways that you can use points for amazing value and just really, really great travel.
No, that's fantastic. And, just to give a little context to folks who may not already have credit card points, like you mentioned, Devin, 75,000 credit card points or 75,000 miles is actually not that much. Oftentimes you get that alone from just signing up for the card. And one of the things that we talked about last time was that when you accumulate these points or you accumulate these miles, instead of redeeming them through the credit card portal, one of the best ways to get value is to actually transfer out the points from your credit card account to these different airline loyalty programs and hotel loyalty programs. But one of the things that I hear all of the time when I'm telling people about this is, oh, that's too complicated. And so I just wanted to know what advice you would have for people who think it might be too complicated and are sort of wondering where to even start.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's just helpful to acknowledge and normalize to begin with. And when we say it's too complicated, I think one of two things are going on, and it's kind of just important and useful to acknowledge those. So number one, it is more complicated than what people are used to as a baseline. It is more complicated than going on to Google Flights, typing in, a flight you want to take, and then picking the best of those options and paying cash for the flight. The steps required to earn and use points are more than just that basic step of running a Google flight search and then paying for travel in cash. So let's acknowledge, yes, it is a little bit of a different process. It's never my approach to tell people like, oh, it's not complicated. Don't worry about that. Like, I don't think that's helpful. But what I do think is helpful is to actually kind of break down. Maybe it's not as complicated as you think, because I think what happens for a lot of us is that, we like to know what to expect. And when it comes to learning a brand new skill or a brand new hobby, especially when we're not familiar with it, a lot of times what happens is we kind of just create an idea about what it must mean, to learn that skill or to get good at that hobby. And oftentimes that's not really based on anything other than just stuff that we think might happen. And so a lot of times when I hear people say, oh, that sounds complicated, what I really hear is them saying, I actually don't even know the steps that are going to be entailed in this. And so my fear is that it's going to be 17 steps, or my fear is that it's going to take 10 hours to do something that used to take me 2 minutes. And that's complicated. And I don't have time or interest in that. And so what I like to tell people is that Number one, it's more complicated than, like I said, going on Google Flights and just booking travel directly that way. But it's probably not as complicated as you might be imagining now because you don't actually know until you get started. And I think it's getting over that first obstacle of what would it look like for me to get started? If I was going to do this in the most simple and straightforward way, what would that look like? And for most people, what that looks like is let me get started with just one points earning credit card. Let me just get one and let me start using that for my everyday spend. Let me just see how complicated it is to start earning points, right? Because there's only two things you need to do in this hobby. Number one is earn points, and then number two is use those points, right? Book travel with those points. And so I think when people get into that first step and realize, oh, okay, I don't need to start with 12 rewards credit cards. I can start with one. I can get used to it. This is not a race. No one's timing you. Like you can take as long as you need to get comfortable with that step. And then it's the same thing with the using of the points. You don't have to learn everything all at once. I think about this a lot in terms of the medical education process, right? Like think back to your very first day of internship, your very first day of residency. If you had walked in and you heard, some fellowship trained, subspecialty boarded folks in your kind of area of training, your area of practice, you heard them talking about a very complicated case. And then they look at you and they say, well, what do you think? What should we do? I mean, maybe that happened to a lot of us. That is intimidating and horrifying. And we're like, I have no idea, right? Like, teach me the basics first. Like, I have to understand the basics first. And that is why residencies are not 1 week long, right? The whole medical education training process is long for a reason because it's methodical in the way that you accumulate knowledge and skill. Now, the amazing news is that no one needs to go through a residency to learn how to use credit card points to travel. But I think the framework is a useful one. No one steps into their first day of residency and starts thinking, oh, I should be able to practice at the level of someone who's got, a board certification, a fellowship, subspecialty certification, has been doing this for 10 years. But a lot of us have that experience where think about the first day of your second year of residency. You probably didn't feel like, oh my gosh, I know so many things. I still felt like I knew nothing the first day of my second year of residency. But then that new group of interns, that new group of first years come in and they know a little bit less than you. And you realize in helping them, wow, I picked up a lot over the last year. Right. And that compounds and that accumulates. And it's the same exact thing here. And so I do like to acknowledge it can seem complicated when the only thing you have to compare it to is what you've been doing so far. And chances are it's actually not as complicated, as overwhelming as you think it might be in the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. And I can say, Devon, by jumping into using credit cards and listening to your podcast, I'm drinking the juice. So I'm on board and I see the value. And the reason why I think that this is so important for me personally is touching back to one of the first points that you made is that your travel is very individual and you can craft this experience to be what you want. For me, this is a little bit of a confession. I'm being vulnerable here, people. So I'm frugal Franny on this end, and my husband loves luxury. Okay. So he will travel because he speaks really all over the world. Like he's been international in his speaking engagements and he likes to travel first class. So for me, when I'm doing the bookkeeping, I'm like, okay, take a deep breath. You spent this much on this flight. Okay. But then recently after I shared our conversation from our first podcast, he said, I have this upcoming travel. How do we leverage these points better? And now because of these conversations, I'm thinking about the same thing. How can I leverage his travel more so that it can give us a better experience? How can we use the points and leverage our expenses so that he can have this luxury experience for travel that he actually deserves because he works really hard, right? And how can we make this work so it meets our financial goals and his life goals? So I'm very appreciative of this. And I want to ask that question. So yes, there is some complexity to this, but if we have a credit card or if you're thinking about, okay, I have summer travel coming up or I have speaking engagements coming up, what's the next step? How can I leverage the travel so that it can accumulate points and have this kind of compounding effect of not only building the confidence, but making those points to work for me in the future? What would you say are those like second steps that a person should take?
Absolutely. So the way that I look at all of money as it comes to travel and points is that everything to me is either a points earning opportunity or a points redeeming opportunity. And here's what I mean by that, because specifically to your example, for your husband, if he already knows he needs to have these travel plans for speaking engagements, for work engagements, he's going to be traveling no matter what, right? So that's an opportunity where either you already have points, and then you can use those points to defray the cost of the travel. So that's a points earning opportunity. Or if you're going to book travel and you're going to pay for it no matter what, it just depends on, the details of what day are you going to go or what exact itinerary you're going to choose. But if you're going to pay for that travel no matter what, and you either don't have points to use on it or you're choosing to save your points for a different use down the road, then that's a points earning opportunity. Anytime that you're going to be spending money, the thing that I'm always thinking of is how can I put myself in the position to earn as many points for this particular expense as possible, knowing that I'm banking those points to then use them again down the road, whether that's 3 months from now or a year from now. And so, one of the best ways to do that in terms of optimizing or maximizing the number of points that you can earn at any one time is this is where it can be helpful, again, when you are comfortable with it, is having specific credit cards for specific uses. So, I think what happens for most of us, sort of pre points travel hobby, is that if we have a credit card, we usually have the credit card, right? We've got one credit card that we use for everything. And that makes sense for most people, right? There's no reason that someone who's not interested in accumulating credit card points for travel to have like 5, 6, 7 different credit cards. But once you're in sort of this framework of understanding that you want to start really optimizing your expenses, is that it no longer actually becomes a best practice to only have one credit card. And the reason for that is that these different credit cards offer the opportunity to earn sort of multiples or extra points based on certain categories of spend. So you could have a credit card that lets you earn 4 points for every dollar you spend, but that's not going to be on anything. It's going to be on very specific categories. And the credit card will tell you that. Like, it's not a mystery. So they'll say, okay, if you use our credit card for restaurant or dining spend, we're going to give you 4 points for every dollar you spend, right? So it can be very strategic to look at what are your areas that you tend to spend the most amount of money on, and just start from the place of, let me look at my single highest category of spend. Let me start there. Let me make sure that I've got a rewards credit card that's going to give me extra points for that specific category. And you can always build out from there. So again, you do not have to start complex. You don't have to start, with this huge handful of cards. But especially when it comes to travel, if you are going to be using travel as a points earning opportunity, there are a lot of these rewards credit cards that specifically offer travel expenses as a bonus category, meaning when you spend money to book a flight, when you spend money to book a stay at a hotel, and you use one of these rewards credit cards that has travel as a bonus category, you're going to be racking up multiples of points for every dollar you spend. And so that can be a very, very easy, again, simple way to get started, is stop thinking about what is just my one credit card that's supposed to do everything for me. Like, let me start being intentional about getting at least one credit card in the beginning that's going to help me earn as many points as possible for the places that I tend to spend money.
My husband has an Amex card and we have a Chase Sapphire Reserve. So, one of the questions is when you use the card, you can go directly to Delta or to American Airlines or to Hilton or Hyatt and make those purchases, or you can use the travel portal. And I have a nightmare experience about using the travel portal and having to get a refund for something. But my husband always uses the travel portal because it's marketed as you get like 5x times the points or more points when you use the sponsored portal. What's your best practice and what advice would you give?
Yeah, I think this is an amazing question because you're right. A lot of times what will happen is that a credit card will have, again, what I call one of these bonus categories, right? So the credit card itself, if you use that credit card to book a flight, they'll say, okay, we're going to give you 3 points for every dollar you spend on that airfare. So you book $100 flight. I don't even know where you can fly anymore for $100, but you book $100 flight, you're going to earn 300 points for that flight. But the same credit card, they also operate exactly what you said, a travel portal, meaning that you can log onto your credit card account and you can go to the online travel booking platform of your credit card and book the same flight. But these are all third-party platforms. So essentially, like if you have a Chase credit card, they use Expedia. So if you're booking any travel through your Chase credit card account, you're basically booking through Expedia, which is very different than booking, like you said, an American Airlines flight straight through the American Airlines website. But the reason that they try to incentivize you to do this is exactly what you said. They will say, okay, you'll earn 3 points per dollar spent if you use our credit card and buy the flight through the airline. But if you use our credit card and you buy the flight through our travel platform, you're going to earn even more than 3 points per dollar spent. And depending on the credit card, that can be like 5 points per dollar spent. Some are, it's even up to like 10. And so when you're thinking just from a numbers perspective, like, yes, 5 is better than 3, 10 is better than 3. In order for me to optimize my points earning, shouldn't I just go with the highest number? And I think this is where it's always important to kind of reflect on what is going to be in your overall best interest. Because to your point, what a lot of these credit card companies don't make really clear is that when you are booking through their travel portal, you're using, like I said, a third party platform. And the problem with that is that then basically everybody gets to absolve themselves of responsibility. Like if there's any problem with the flight, even that's nothing to do with you, like you're not trying to change or cancel the flight or the hotel stay or the rental car booking, but something is happening on the end of, the vendor. There's a huge
Mhm.
storm or, whatever happens now that impacts travel, which seems like everything, is that if you have any sort of problem with that itinerary, basically no one claims responsibility for it. You can call the airline and say, this flight got canceled or it got delayed. Help me. And they'll say, well, you didn't book through us. You need to contact your credit card. You booked through them. Then you call the credit card and they say, well, no, we're not operating the flight, or we're not operating the hotel. You need to go talk to them. And you get stuck in this limbo. And I think for a lot of us, the cost of that time, the cost of that sort of mental energy trying to then fix some of these problems, that outweighs, to me personally, a couple of extra points per dollar spent. Like I'm someone who's all for, obviously, like let's optimize, let's maximize and put ourselves in the position to earn as many points as reasonable, for the money that we're already spending. But I also kind of titrate or calibrate that against what is my priority in terms of my time and my energy. And I have had that experience before, long, long, long time ago, booking travel through my credit card's travel portal and then having to go back and deal with it. And it basically took 20 hours and I don't even think got fully resolved. And you get so frustrated, you just kind of give up. Like at some point, you cut your losses, and you're like, I'm just going to move on from this. And so my personal sort of recommendation, my personal preference is that I do not book travel through my credit card's travel portal, even if it means I'm quote unquote sacrificing earning a little bit of points. And I always book direct through airlines. I always book my hotel stays directly through a hotel. I always book rental car straight through the rental car companies themselves. I never book through my Chase travel portal, my American Express travel portal, because I think the potential downside of that is so much higher than the potential upside of earning a few points. Because if we're going to be thinking big, big picture, right? It's bigger than just booking any one single flight where I'm willing to, like I said, quote unquote, sacrifice a couple of points per dollar spent on booking one single flight because I have an overall plan, right? My expenses tend to be so much bigger than just booking, one single flight or one single hotel stay. And I know that if I have the credit cards in place that are going to really allow me to maximize my spend, again, across all the things that I'm spending money on, then the impact, of quote unquote losing out on a couple of points by not booking through a travel portal, I actually think is very, very small compared to that.
Yeah, yeah. Devin, I love this. And I wanted to see if we could help Brittany out a little bit more because Brittany, you told us that your husband has the Amex Platinum, non-branded Amex Platinum. I don't know if it's personal or business. Do you happen to know, Brittany, if it's personal or business?
Personal.
Personal. Okay. And then he also has the Chase Sapphire Reserve, right? And you are an authorized user, if I'm not mistaken, on both of them, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, Devin, can we help Brittany out? Question number one is which card should she use for which things? And question number two is should she get her own cards or continue to be an authorized user on her husband's card?
Oh my gosh, I love this so much. The first question in terms of, which card should you use, especially because this will happen for a lot of people. You can start, especially if you start bringing on more than one points earning credit card into what I call your credit card portfolio, which is just essentially the number of credit cards that you have and use, is that a lot of times these credit cards are going to have overlapping features or redundant features. And you're going to have to choose, wait a minute, if I have two credit cards and they both give me elevated bonus points for a certain category spent, in this case, booking a flight, how do I know? Like, how do I go with a Chase Sapphire Reserve that might earn me 3 points per dollar spent on flights booked versus a different card like the personal Amex Platinum might give me 5 points, per dollar spent. So here's what I like to tell people is first of all, if you don't have a strong reason for picking one or the other, do not stress about it. Because I think this is where people get stuck, right? If they don't have a compelling reason to go in one direction or the other, then it feels like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do the wrong thing, or I don't know which to pick. Therefore, I don't want to do anything. Especially those of us who are, a little type A, a little perfectionist, a little overachieving, like we work in a professional environment where our decisions carry such high consequences that I find that sometimes we can apply that same type of thinking to other areas of our life that don't have quite the same consequences, right? Like my favorite thing about credit card points and travel is that no one's going to die if you make a mistake with them. Really, like you're never going to make such a big mistake that the consequence is going to be tragic in your life. And so my first piece of advice is if you've got two cards and they're both going to give you extra points for an expense and you don't know which one to use, just pick one. Honestly, it is okay. Just pick one. Because then what happens is that as you get more experienced, you will start to develop kind of your own pattern for how you want to prioritize things. For instance, someone might say, I always want to prioritize using whatever card is just going to give me the highest return for that spend. Right. So if I have two cards, one's going to allow me to earn 3 points per dollar spent on airfare and one's going to allow me to earn five. I'm just always going to go with a five because my priority is I always want to be earning as many points as possible for an expense. That is a completely valid line of thinking and prioritization. Another completely valid line of prioritization or thinking is I am someone personally who carries Chase points earning cards and American Express points earning cards. And so I've usually got an option of, two really good cards for any type of expense. And there are times where I will prioritize whatever card is going to earn me the highest number of points. But as I said, as you gain a little bit more experience, you may start finding that for a particular flight or trip that you want to plan for that's coming up in a year, that sometimes one flavor of points is going to be much more useful for a specific type of travel. And that's kind of where I am in my travel, where I'm used to now kind of the different airlines I can use, the different hotels I can use. And so for me, if I'm thinking about, my kids' spring break, like I'm already thinking, because I'm a planner, where are we going to go for spring break of 2025? Like I know my kids' school schedule, the hotels and airlines have not opened up their booking calendars yet, but the minute they do, I want to be on there. I want to be grabbing, all the good stuff for me and my family. And so if I have an idea in mind, oh, I think we're going to want to stay at a particular hotel chain, then what I start looking at is if I have one flavor of points that is going to be particularly useful or valuable for an upcoming trip, I will oftentimes then just prioritizing using that flavor of credit cards because I want to build up that points balance. These are two totally different examples where there is no wrong answer. It really depends on what are you trying to do with your points right now. And that's why I think if you're not yet at the experience level where you can say, oh, I know that for the next 8 months, I'm going to prioritizing earning Chase points over Amex points no matter what. If all you ever do is just default to your highest points earning card, that's never going to be a mistake for you.
Love that. Thank you. I think the second question was, yes, you got it. Okay.
And this, I think, is such a great question because this really represents to me one of the fundamental shifts or differences of kind of the way that you can think about best practices when you are really aiming to earn a lot of points and use them for travel versus sort of the pre-travel hobby best practice. So I talked before about how, pre-travel hobby, a lot of folks will have their just one go-to credit card. And again, I think that makes sense when your priority is, I want a straightforward kind of financial portfolio. I don't need 12 different credit cards. Let me pick one solid, great card and just turn to that all the time. I think that's fantastic for people who are not really interested in earning and using credit card points for travel. Now, sort of similarly, people who are not that interested or people who don't know about using points for travel, I think a very common practice, especially for folks who have a partner, is that you will essentially have one credit card. Like there's almost always the one partner in a partnership where they will apply for the credit cards and they will add their partner or their spouse as what's called an authorized user on the account. So you each have a physical credit card that you can use, but the account is really only tied to that primary account user. And people do this in different ways, especially for folks who have combined finances. Again, I think this makes sense, right? Like this is streamlined, this is simple, this is efficient. But when you get into the world of credit card points and travel, that approach actually doesn't make sense. And I will tell you why. Because if you are part of a partnership, there's two folks, you actually have an amazing opportunity, which is that remember that when you're thinking about signing up for a new rewards credit card, that almost all of these cards will offer, and Lisha had sort of alluded to this in the beginning, a lot of these credit cards have what's called a sign-up bonus or a welcome bonus, where if this is the first time you've signed up for a rewards, for that specific rewards card, as long as you meet the minimum spend requirement, which is just you have to put X amount of money on the card the first 3 months or 4 months you hold it. Now the credit card issuer is going to reward you with this big bolus, this big chunk of points. That sign up or welcome bonus, you are eligible to earn that. Like every single individual person can earn that. And so if you are in a partnership, what actually makes a lot of sense a lot of times is that you don't actually make your partner an authorized user on your credit cards. You each independently go and apply for credit cards because that means you both have the opportunity then to earn these initial welcome bonuses or sign up bonuses. I use those terms interchangeably. And then you can essentially double the amount of points that you're earning in a very, very short period of time. There are other reasons too that I think it is not as useful useful to make your partner or spouse an authorized user on your credit card purely from a strategic perspective in terms of earning points. But putting all the points things aside, from a personal finance perspective, I see that this is an area that so many, specifically women, end up getting harmed by. And this is, again, I think this is just the pattern that I've tended to see the most is that in a partnership where it's either people who are legally married or people who are domestic partners, if it's a partnership where it's a man and a woman, what I see a lot of times is that the primary account holder tends to be the man. Like he's the one who just tends to submit the application online for a credit card, makes their partner the authorized user. And the problem with this is that even if you completely share finances, even if in that type of arrangement, it's the female partner who's the breadwinner or who has the higher paying job or is the business owner, what people don't realize is that the authorized user is not really benefiting from being the primary account holder in terms of the impact on building up their own credit, having their own independent credit score. And I think this is really, really important to name, right? That financial autonomy is really, really important. And I think that people, again, for the sake of convenience, don't always realize what are some of the impacts if you are the partner who's always just the authorized user, that you are not holding a lot of primary accounts in your own name. You're not building up credit in your own name. I think that that's something that needs to be paid more attention to that, again, is separate from just the issue of, oh, how can we optimize our ability to earn as many points as a partnership? And I think that it's really useful to take that into consideration as well.
So this raises another question for me. Now that I am an authorized user, if we know that our anniversary is approaching in which they're going to charge us the fee for holding these credit cards, should I cancel the credit card? Should I open up my own credit card? Should we use a referral for my husband to me so that I can get the extra points? And then now we have two premier credit cards with two premier charges. So how do you balance all of that?
Yes, such a fantastic question. So let's start from that perspective. I'm going to take sort of like the second or the back end of that question first, which is let's say that you are in a partnership, right? Like two adults, they each theoretically, have the ability to go out, apply for, get approved for credit cards. Strategically, from a points earning perspective, what can make a ton of sense is exactly what you said, where in this case, let's say your husband is the primary account holder of the Chase Sapphire Reserve and you've been an authorized user. One thing to understand is that just because you're an authorized user on his account, you are still eligible to apply for your own Chase Sapphire Reserve card. You don't have to remove yourself from his account. Being an authorized user does not exclude you from the eligibility to get your own card. And yes, what can make so much sense, and this is how you can really leverage points earning in a partnership, is all or at least most of these rewards credit cards have the ability for the primary account holder to refer someone else to the card. It can be a friend, family member, doesn't have to be their partner. But if that person gets approved, then the referrer earns bonus points. So in this example, your husband can refer you to get your own Chase Sapphire card. You can get approved for the card so you can earn the sign-up bonus points. He is going to earn referral points once you get approved. And so combined, you as a partnership have just earned a ton of points. So just in general, anyone who has a partner, and again, it does not have to be a romantic partner, a domestic partner, or a spouse. If you have a parent who's really interested in this, you and your parent can refer each other to credit cards and earn referral points. If you have a trusted friend or you have, a colleague at work and you're both really interested in this, then you can refer each other back and forth to credit cards and both benefit that way. So that's the first point. And then the second point is, yes, a lot of times with these rewards credit cards, not all of them have an annual fee, which is just the fee that you have to pay the credit card bank or issuer for you to hold that credit card and have that account open. Not all of them have a fee, but a lot of the mid or top tier rewards credit cards, they will have annual fees. And these can range from at a mid tier level, maybe around $95 a year. But the premium travel credit cards, some of the ones we've talked about today, the personal American Express Platinum card, the Chase Sapphire Reserve card, these annual fees are not insignificant. I mean, they can be $550, $695 a year for the primary account holder. So when you're thinking about two people in a partnership, if theoretically you both have your own personal American Express Platinum card, you're each going to be paying that $695 annual fee to keep your account open. So for sure, that has to come into your overall planning about what are the cards that are best for you. And one of the things that I think it's important for people to understand is that you can open up a new rewards credit card. You can make the minimum spend requirements so that you earn the sign-up bonus points, but you're not obligated to keep that card open then for the rest of your life. Again, I think this goes back to sort of like pre-rewards card kind of financial habits. I think a lot of us think if I open up a card, like, man, this is more than marriage. Like together till death do we part. This thing and I, we are attached. And it actually doesn't have to be like that. Now, the best practice is you never want to cancel a rewards credit card that you've held for less than 12 months. That will and can and potentially will put you in jeopardy in terms of your relationship with the bank. They don't want you to sign up for a card and cancel it 3, 4 months down the line. But as long as you've held one of these reward credit cards for at least 12 months, then you are not obligated to hold it for the rest of your life. And so I actually think part of, for me, what I consider to be credit card hygiene, like we go to the dentist twice a year and get your teeth cleaned, or, you have like your mammogram. We have all of the health hygiene things we do. The same is true of the credit card portfolio. So I always make it a point at least once a year, and I honestly do it twice a year just because it makes me feel better. I will just pull out literally every single rewards card I have, and I will look at what is the annual fee on every single one of these cards. And I will look at, okay, what is my plan for the next year? Essentially, do I want to keep this card? Do I want to cancel this card? Or do I want to do what's called a product change, where you can actually trade a credit card for another sort of credit card option in the same family? And the big reason to do that is specifically if you have a card that you are no longer getting a lot of value out of because your travel patterns changed or because you moved and now the airlines, that are at your hub are totally different than they used to be. Again, you're not obligated to hold these cards, for decades and decades. But if you do decide that you have a card, especially kind of one of these premium level rewards credit cards, that it doesn't make sense for you to continue to hang on to, you don't have to outright cancel it. You can do this thing called a product change where you can trade it for a different credit card from the same issuer, often one that has a much lower or no annual fee. And the benefit of the product change is that when you do that, you keep that account open. You haven't shut it down. So remember, I know last time we talked about what really goes into your credit score and the importance of the credit utilization ratio. And this is, again, where I think our financial system is not set up to be logical. I think reasonable, logical people would think if I have a credit card and I don't expect to use it anymore after a given time, it is responsible for me to close down that account. I don't need it. Right? Like, I don't want to worry about what's going to happen to it or keeping track of it or anything. But the problem is when you close down a credit card account, you lose access to that line of credit. So let's say that credit card had $25,000 credit line on it. Well, if all of a sudden you close that account and you lose access to that $25,000 of credit, but your spending patterns are exactly the same, you're still being very responsible, paying off all your bills, every single month, your credit utilization score is going to get hurt just because you lost access to that credit. And that is going to impact your credit score. And it can be a negative impact on your credit score. And so when it comes to these cards, again, you don't have to keep holding on to cards that don't make sense for you, but oftentimes it doesn't make sense to just cancel them outright. So the analysis I always do is for every individual card, I always look at what is the annual fee? What is it costing me to hang on to this card? And what is the benefit I'm getting from this card? And that can be a couple different things. It can be, this is my card that gives me the best bonus spend return on an area that I tend to spend a lot of money on. So this is a really high points earning card for me. It's a workhorse for me. That may be enough to justify the annual fee, right? Or maybe that is a card that gives you access to some travel perk or benefit. Again, that's very, very useful for you. Maybe you're really lucky and your home airport is one of the ones that has an amazing lounge that you can have access to just by holding a specific credit card. So that may be a card that you don't actually put a ton of spend on, but the fact that it lets you into a really fantastic airport lounge every single time you travel, that is enough of a value add to your experience in your life that it justifies hanging on to that card. And so it's a very kind of simple and straightforward analysis that I do with all my cards. It's just, how much is this costing me to hold on to it for another year? And am I getting enough value from using this card right now? Again, either from a bonus category or some perk or benefit that justifies paying the fee for me. And again, this is going to be personal, right? You may find that you have a card that is an amazing fit for you for 4 years, and then something in your life changes in terms of your expenses or your travel priorities. You reevaluate and say, oh, moving forward, this card isn't the best fit for me anymore. No problem. I'm not obligated to hang on to it, but this is where I can explore that opportunity to trade or product change it for something that might be a better fit for me now.
I love that. So now I feel like we have this golden opportunity, Devon, because Brittne has been an authorized user on her husband's cards, and now we're sort of changing the game for her. And I venture to say that there are people listening to this episode that may be in a similar position. Either they've only been an authorized user on their partner's cards, or they haven't taken out a credit card in a very long time. And so they're sort of new to this game. And I know that the last time that we spoke, we were sort of trying to get people started. And you and I sort of mentioned that if we were getting started from scratch today, two of the cards that we might consider will be the Chase Sapphire Preferred and the Amex Personal Gold card. So not necessarily the premium cards. And what I think is interesting about these two cards is the Chase Sapphire cards sort of have two versions. The Preferred, which is a lower tier with a lower annual fee of $95, versus the Chase Sapphire Reserve, which is the highest tier annual fee of $500. Same thing with the Amex cards. So a lot of different Amex cards, but when we're comparing the personal gold to the personal gold annual fee $250 versus the personal platinum annual fee like $695. So both of these cards sort of have a lower or a mid tier and then the highest tier. Can you talk a little bit about why some people might benefit by starting off at that mid tier with that Chase Sapphire Preferred and Amex personal gold instead of sort of starting off at that highest tier?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of reasons. And again, I think this is such a fantastic question. So, in terms of these quote unquote mid tier cards, first of all, I think it is a huge selling point that their annual fees are not as high as the premium or the quote unquote top tier travel cards. Especially if you are thinking of getting two cards, I think that's a big ask of someone who's never had points earning credit cards before to just jump into, for example, the Chase Sapphire Reserve and an Amex Personal Platinum card. You got over $1,000 a year in annual fees just from the get go. And so I think for a lot of people, again, my philosophy is you can always turn up the volume on this. We don't need to dive into the deep end immediately. So I think these mid tier cards are just amazing entry level cards for people to begin in this hobby. They're really solid in terms of their points earning. So I actually think one of those examples, the personal American Express Gold card, I think of all of my cards, that is one of them that gets used the absolute most because it has such fantastic bonus categories. You can earn 4 points for every dollar you spend on groceries and dining. And show me a person or show me a family that doesn't combined have significant grocery and dining spend. Sure, there's probably maybe one or two out there, but I think for the vast majority of people, this is such an easy card to use. And again, it's not that it's cheap, $250 a year annual fee, that's not nothing, but it's not close to $1,000. And again, for the impact that you can get from the personal Amex Gold card, I think it's just such a wonderful kind of entry level starter card. And can very easily become a cornerstone of your points earning. I've had that card for years, and it has always been, since I've gotten it, a cornerstone of my Amex points earning. In terms of the Chase side, again, the Chase Sapphire Preferred compared to the Reserve, it earns points at a little bit of a lower rate, but it still has solid bonus categories. And it's just, I think, easier from the perspective of if you are not already really confident that you're going to be able to take advantage of some of those extra perks and benefits and bells and whistles of the higher tier Chase Sapphire Reserve card, then I think it's great to start with the Chase Sapphire Preferred. A lot of times, what you can keep in mind is that if you start with any card, and again, you can evaluate in a year, 6 months, 2 years, if at some point, you reevaluate a card and either because your spending patterns have changed or your priorities have changed and you're thinking, oh, now I would like to graduate or I would like to move up to a higher tier card, that's almost always possible. A lot of the banks do have some rules about how quickly you can do that or the number of different credit cards from them you can hold at one time. But for the most part, if you want to move quote unquote up and get, a more expensive higher tier card, a lot of issuers are going to be like, yes, we would love for you to do that. So it's not like you make one decision and then you're locked out of all of your other options forever and ever and ever. And so, there are going to be some people who, even from the beginning, the higher tier, the premium level credit card is the one that's a good fit for them. But just like we were talking about earlier in the conversation, I find that most of the time, if the premium tier credit card is the one that's going to be the best fit for someone, they are going to know. Like they are going to walk in saying, oh, I know that because of my current travel needs, I want to go for the card that's automatically going to give me the most perks and benefits because I already know I am going to benefit from that lounge access or I am going to benefit from that travel insurance that's just better, on the higher tier card than the lower tier card. Or I know I'm going to be able to take advantage of the bonus categories that give me a little bit better return, for instance, on the Chase Sapphire Reserve than the Chase Sapphire Preferred. So okay, my philosophy is like, if you don't have a really strong reason to pick one thing over the other, then go with the one that's easier to start with.
Yeah, yeah. Devin, really quickly, as people are getting started, I think it might be helpful for them to know a couple of things. And I was wondering if you could talk about them is the Chase 524 rule and the Amex family rule as they're thinking about which cards to get started with.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really important to understand when you're kind of getting into this hobby or continuing in this hobby is that a lot of these different credit card banks or issuers, especially over the last 10 years, because I've been doing this for a long time. And so it used to feel kind of like the wild, wild west. Like there were no rules, there were no regulations. You could do all sorts of nutty things like apply for 9 rewards credit cards all on the same day and get approved for all of them.
Wow.
Well, what happened is that as I think this hobby did become more accessible, information was so much easier to find, with the advent of the internet and a lot of different points and travel blogs and, websites and all of these things, is that more and more people started engaging in this hobby. And so I think kind of as a response to that, banks have instituted over the years more and more rules and regulations that sort of limit kind of how fast you can move in this hobby or how many cards you can get at any one time. And so it is important that you become aware of what are some of the governing rules of this, just so you can take them into account in terms of creating your own game plan or your own roadmap for what are the cards that I think I would like to get over the next year or 2 years. And let me keep these rules in mind so that I can make sure that I am making the most strategic decisions for myself. And two of the rules that you mentioned that I think are important for people to know is within the American Express family of credit cards, American Express offers a lot of really incredible options for points earning credit cards. But of their personal credit cards, they have three where you can earn American Express's version of the transferable points currency. And they call their points membership rewards points. So on the personal side of consumer credit cards, they have an American Express Green Card, an American Express Gold Card, and an American Express Platinum Card. And it used to be that you could hold all three of these cards as an individual and you could get them in any order you wanted. It didn't matter. Recently, as of like the last year, American Express came out with what a lot of us are now calling or referring to them as the family rule of cards. And this is essentially American Express's way of regulating the order in which you can be approved for these cards. And if you want to think about it like a ladder, the American Express Green Card is at the bottom, and then a couple rungs up is the American Express Gold Card, and then a couple of rungs up from that is the American Express Platinum Card. And so what the family rule states is that you can enter that ladder at any point. So you can get the green card first, the gold card first, or the platinum card first. But once you're in the ladder, you can only move up. You cannot move down. So if you start, like a lot of people actually do start or used to start with the American Express personal platinum card. If you start there, that's fine. But you are never then going to be able to get and earn the welcome bonus on the gold card or the green card. Okay. So if you want to get into the American Express ecosystem of cards and points, it can be strategic to start with the green card because that still leaves you the option a couple months down the line or a year down the line. If you want to get the gold card or the platinum card, you can. So you can only move up the ladder. You can't move down the ladder. And then in terms of Chase was really the first bank that instituted a really important rule that affected kind of not only their own credit cards, but the entire credit card landscape. It was fascinating to me is like, this is not a published rule. Like it is so well known now, and it seems like it's as true as gravity, but Chase never put out like an official release about this rule. And what I'm referring to is what's called the Chase 524 rule. And this came out around 2016. So again, before 2016, Chase issues, I don't know, something like 20 or 30 different points earning cards you could get in between the airline credit cards they have, the hotel credit cards they have. Some folks might have the Amazon card or the Disney card. And then Chase also has their credit cards where you can earn their transferable points currency, which is known as Chase Ultimate Rewards cards. So you've got all these amazing cards to choose from just within Chase as one single issuer. And again, it used to be that you could just get all of them, or you could get all of them. You could get them all in a very short time frame. But I think as an effort to try to slow people down in terms of the number of cards they were getting and the pace they were getting them at, Chase instituted this unpublished, but again, very real rule that says essentially that in order to get a new Chase credit card, that you are not going to be eligible to get approved for a new Chase card if you have opened up 5 or more new credit card accounts in the prior 24 months. And that's not specific to Chase. If you've opened up 5 new credit cards from anywhere in the prior 24 months, you can't get any Chase cards. And where this impacts people is there's a lot of us walking around where, again, in our early days, we got suckered into signing up for the Macy's credit card or the J. Crew credit card because we were buying, a coat for the winter and we're checking out and they're like, hey, do you want 20%, off of this purchase? Open up a store credit card. We'll give you a discount. And for those of us who are very poor in residency, we were like, yes, I want to save those $18. And we ended up with store credit cards, right? So the reason this is important is because you may not have any points earning credit cards, but if you have opened up store specific credit cards in the prior 2 years, that counts towards your Chase 524 score. So you may now be really interested in a Chase Sapphire Preferred card, but if you've opened up, a Macy's card or a Bloomingdale's card, Gap card, whatever the case may be, 5 of those in the prior 24 months, you're not yet going to be eligible for a new Chase card until enough time has passed that those accounts are no longer within your prior 2-year period. And so for that reason, a lot of people do start their rewards credit card hobby with the Chase ecosystem of credit cards, and they get the Chase cards they want first before branching out really heavily into American Express cards or Capital One cards or other credit cards because they want to save those quote unquote Chase 524 slots to be able to get the Chase credit cards they want first. and then branch out from there. And so, again, this is one of those just important rules you need to be aware of, that it exists, because it can impact your ability to get cards within the Chase ecosystem if those are cards that are really appealing to you.
Wow, Devin, you have been a wealth of information. I'm so glad that you said that you could talk about credit card points forever, because I have one final question, if that's okay. So I'm thinking about canceling cards, or you have a change in your life circumstances. So you're doing all of this work, you're earning all these points, and then you realize that you actually won't be able to travel as much as you wanted, or you have to cancel a card because now it's becoming so expensive and it's not serving you. Because the first question is, do you lose the points? And then the second question is, if you're not using them, can you transfer them to other people to use?
Yeah, so this is, again, such a great question. And the answer's going to vary kind of depending on the specific credit card issuer or credit card bank. So I'm not going to go through an exhaustive list, but I will give people just a couple of guidelines that you can think about. So oftentimes, specifically with these transferable points earning credit cards, as long as you have one credit card open that can kind of hold those points, then they will be safe. So let's say you're starting out with 3 Chase cards and you want to cancel 2 of them because, like you said, you don't want to carry these cards with annual fees anymore. And let's just say you don't even product change them or trade them out. You just cancel them. As long as you've got one of that same type of points earning card that is open and the account is in good standing, that can serve as the reservoir to keep your points alive and safe. And so you don't need to worry about that. Where you do need to worry is if you only have a single credit card within a bank or credit card or points ecosystem that holds your points, and you're going to cancel that card, then you can lose the points. And so what you want to do if that is your scenario is, again, this is where the rules are going to differ based on who the credit card issuer is. You will have options of things you can do with those points. You can cash them out for a straight statement credit. You can trade them in oftentimes for things like store gift cards if you want, or you can go ahead and transfer them to one of the credit card transfer partners before you close the account. And then those points will live in a specific airline or hotel loyalty account. So those are all different options. But really what you want to take away is that as long as you still have one card in that points ecosystem, then you can close other cards and those points are going to be safe.
Can you transfer them to other individuals?
Oftentimes, the answer is yes, but the details of that are going to depend on the actual credit card or points issuer. So when we look at a lot of these points systems, I think Capital One is the best one from this perspective. Capital One basically says, you can take your Capital One points, you can give them to anybody else who has a Capital One account that can accept these points. You don't have to be related to them. You don't have to share an address with them. They probably don't even care if you know them. But I mean, you can basically just transfer to anybody, which is really great. It's very flexible. Chase has different rules. They basically say, at least for points that are earned on personal credit cards, that you can combine points with, or you can transfer your Chase points to another Chase card holder who is a family member or someone who shares the same household address as you. So again, let's say you have an adult parent living with you. Let's say you have, a teenager living with you and also your partner. Theoretically, if every single one of those people has a Chase points earning card, you all can mix and match and pull from each other and combine from each other. American Express has some of the less useful kind of points combining rules. You cannot actually combine your American Express points with anyone else. Again, it doesn't matter if they're your spouse, doesn't matter if they're the person that you live with. You cannot take American Express points and give them to someone else's American Express account. But what they do allow you to do is that if someone has been an authorized user on your Amex account for at least 90 days, you can move your own Amex points into an airline or hotel transfer partner of your authorized user. So let's say my husband is an authorized user on one of my Amex cards. I could take my Amex points and I can move them into his Air France Flying Blue frequent flyer account. So you can effectively combine the points. You just can't move them into Amex points for someone else. And then Citi has really, really wonky rules. Like if you have a Citi card that earns Citi points, they have a lot of rules about if you transferred, those points can expire at a hard deadline. So basically don't transfer Citi points with someone unless they know exactly what they want to do with them, basically immediately. But again, all of these different issuers have different nuances, to some of their rules, but it's not hard to find those rules through a simple Google search. It's just that it's not going to be the same for every single bank.
No, that's lovely. And my final question is any best practices for redeeming points? And what I mean by that is Brittany knew that she was flying to California. Her husband and kids were going to Atlanta. And she was like, okay, I want to use my points. And it's like, "Oh, are there things that we should do? Transfer them to different, loyalty accounts." And so I think maybe some best practices for people as they're trying to utilize their points would be helpful.
Yes. So I think where everybody starts out, and I don't care where you end up, but where everybody starts out when they first begin accumulating credit card points is that all of us go through a period where the only way we know how to use our points is by logging onto our credit card account and then clicking the button that says book travel. And that takes you to your credit card's travel portal. This is what we were talking about before, right? Like you log onto your credit card account and you can book flights, hotel, rental car directly through your credit card account. And this is, again, where I think every single person starts because this is the only option that most of us know is available to us. And so this is not the way that I would recommend most people use their points for a couple reasons. Number one, oftentimes, it can be a huge headache. If there's anything you need to do to change or alter that reservation, I've heard horror stories about people who booked a hotel through their credit card travel portal, showed up, and the hotel was like, hey, great, you're here. We don't have any evidence of a reservation for you, which to me sounds horrifying, especially if I'm traveling with my kids. I don't want to have to deal with that. So, number one, understanding that the only way that you may know how to use your credit card points right now is to book travel through your credit card portal, and that is not always the best option. So, not only from that convenience perspective, but also from the perspective of how much value you can get from your points, because every single credit card issuer, when you use your points through your credit card account, the credit card issuer is going to say all of your points have a fixed value. A lot of people are familiar with this. You log onto your account, it says you have 100,000 points. And like right below that, it'll say this is worth $1,000 in travel. And it doesn't matter, what travel you book. You can basically exchange 100,000 points for $1,000 in travel or $1,500 in travel. And that's great compared to zero. I think all of us would definitely pick to save 100 or save $1,000 over saving no dollars. But what the credit card company is not telling you is that if you actually do what we've talked about, which is you transfer your credit card points out of your Chase account or out of your American Express account and into an airline transfer partner account or hotel transfer partner account, that's where you can start getting outsized value. So instead of getting $1,000 worth of value for 100,000 points, you can get $3,000 of value or $5,000 of value. And this is where the points become really, really powerful. And again, I don't expect people to know how to do this automatically. What I want people to take away from this conversation is that if you've only ever been familiar with using your credit card points straight through your credit card account, please just understand there is another option available to you. And as you learn about that option, you can get 3, 5, 10 times the cash value from your points than what your credit card company is telling you. And from a logistics point of view, when we talk about transferring your points, so you do this all digitally online through your credit card account where you pick the airline or hotel that you want to shoot your points over to. So let's say you're in your Chase account. You can say, I want to move 100,000 of my Chase points into my United Airlines frequent flyer account. So you can do that. You can set it up and the points will go out of your Chase account and then land in your United account. The important thing for people to understand, again, regardless of the points that you're starting with or where you move them, is that these transfers are one way and irreversible. So once you set up that transfer and those points land wherever you told the bank you wanted them to land, you cannot move them back. So they're safe. They'll hang out in that airline frequent flyer account or your hotel loyalty account. They're not going to die and disappear, but you cannot change your mind and move them back. So one of the things that you just want to start understanding is that until you know exactly how you want to use these points, you don't want to transfer them out of your credit card account. But once you've started running some searches and you found a United flight you want to book with United Miles, you know that it's available for the day you want to travel and the route you want to travel. That's the time that you transfer the points. And so those are just some really basic guidelines that people can begin to start with.
I love that. I love that. And Devon, I know that we're running short on time. Thank you so much for being so generous and answering all of our questions. But if people have further questions, Brittne and I both are aware of your fantastic podcast. And I know that you actually have a course that some people can take if they want to ask you a gazillion questions, just like we did, or, want to learn even more about all of the fancy trips that you take and how you're able to do that with your entire family. So just tell the people where they can find you, a little bit more about your course and things like that.
Absolutely. So for people who just want a little bit more information, want to learn about this very, very low bar to entry, you can find me on my website. It's just www.pointmetofirstclass.com. I have some resources there that are all absolutely free that you can access anytime you want. And then also my podcast, which is just called the Point Me to First Class podcast. You can find that anywhere you like to listen to podcasts. And that's where I really do deeper dives into specific topics. I try to do beginner topics, also intermediate and more experience level topics so that you can go through those podcast episodes based on the level that you're at and just pick the ones that are going to be the most useful for you. I think that's a really easy way to get started, right? There's no commitment. You can go at your own pace. You can learn what's relevant to you. And then, like you mentioned, I do offer a paid course called the Points Made Easy course. And this is really for folks who've kind of gotten over that first obstacle or that first hurdle where they really understand the potential value that points hold, but they might be feeling a little overwhelmed or a little bit intimidated or a little bit busy. A lot of us have a lot going on in our lives. And really, what they want to do is press the easy button of how can I learn the most high yield, the most valuable information about earning points and using points that isn't going to require me to spend my nights and weekends sifting through a bunch of different internet websites and blogs. I've really compiled everything that I know and have learned about the most high yield way to earn and use points, especially for physicians, other professionals who have probably a little bit higher than average spend, and really understanding the techniques that are available to us to leverage that spend to earn points. All of that is laid out inside the Points Made Easy course. And that's also the place where people get the most support from me because it is a smaller group. It makes it a lot easier for me to be able to get in there and really offer a lot of personalized help to people in terms of creating their credit card portfolios, making their travel plans, and learning how to use those points and find some of those really amazing high redemption values so that, you're using 75,000 points to fly halfway around the world in business class versus flying a 2-hour domestic flight, in economy for the same number of points. And so for people who are ready for that sort of level of mentorship and really want to fast track their ability to start moving with earning and using points, they can find me in the Points Made Easy course. I enroll in that usually once or twice a year, but all the information about that is also on my website. So that is a great place to start in terms of finding me and learning a little bit more about this work.
Thank you so much, Devon, for all of the personal advice for our listeners. I hope you got something. I definitely got something. So, Lisha, thank you for asking questions on my behalf as well.
Thanks again, Devon. We love having you. We appreciate all that you do for us.
Thank you so much for having me. Again, it's always such a privilege to be here with you and your amazing audience. Thank you so, so much.
All right. And now into our last segment, which is our fun money segment. Brittne, what is something fun that you are doing with your money?
Lisha, I can say I talked about me at the fancy galas. Most time when I'm at the gala, because we've already made a contribution, I usually don't have my bidding ticket, but this time I did. We actually bid for something and we won it. And that was a little bit like gambling. I don't know if you're a gambler, but I don't like risks. And so it's okay, I put my thing up for, $100 and then somebody's like $200. And then after a while, this thing has gone up to $1,000. You're like, wait, am I still in the game? Am I not in the game? But we did some bidding this time at the gala and we had a lot of fun and we won a few things. So one is we have this vacation home in Maine that we'll be going to this year.
Whoa,
Yeah.
congrats. I'm excited for you.
Yeah, it's I don't know, 6 bedrooms or something like that. So we're going to invite another family to come with us and that will be really, really fun. And not to say that this is the best part, but we're benefiting a great organization and it's tax deductible because it's a donation, right? And so
Yeah.
we get some vacation with the tax deduction. So that's what I'm doing with money.
That's awesome. I'm very excited for you. What am I doing fun with money? So I mentioned earlier on this show that I was getting ready to go to Spain and planning out activities, but also as a part of this trip, the main reason I'm going to Europe is because of my friend's wedding. And the friend's wedding is in the south of France. And I was trying to plan out what I'm going to do when I get to the south of France, when I fly from Spain to France, obviously go to the wedding, but I have this free day. And I just texted my friend and was like, hey, really excited about your wedding. I have this idea. Let me know if I'm crazy. And she's like, what's your idea? And I was like, I want to go to San Tropez. I don't know if you've heard of San Tropez. San Tropez is in the south of France. And I was like, I don't think it's that far from where we're going to be. And so she texted me back and she was like, it's not that far. You could drive there, totally go. And so now I feel like I'm super fancy now, Brittne, because I'm going to San Tropez. Doesn't it just sound rich? I feel like it's
It
where
does.
rich people go. I don't know. I'm going to go to San Tropez. So anyway, that's something fun I'm going to do with my money is go to explore that city.
Oh, I love it. And, I'm living vicariously through you and I'm putting all of these places on my bucket list. All right, people. Well, we want to say thank you for listening to this episode.
Hopefully you all enjoyed it from Devon's interview.
And we hope that you learned something. Bye-bye. Hello, and thank you for listening to our podcast. And because of that, we have something for you, our Wealthy Mind Starter Kit.
Have you ever thought to yourself, I wish I could be better with money? Do you want to start investing and saving for retirement, but keep delaying because you don't know where to start? Our Wealthy Mind Starter Kit is here to help.
This guide will teach you what you didn't learn in your training so you can stop being confused about money and start taking what we call wealthy-minded action.
We'll help you become a master of your finances and simplify investing so you can get started today. Take control of your financial future by downloading your free copy of the Wealthy Mind Starter Kit now and start building the wealth you deserve.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for my mommy, Dr. Brittne Halford, and her friend, Dr. Lisha Taylor. Just so you know, they're not financial advisors, tax professionals, lawyers, or financial planners. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, you know. So use your best judgment, chat with a tax professional, and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.
One of the most important things you can do is ensure you have long-term disability insurance. Long-term disability insurance secures your income if the unexpected happens and you are unable to work due to medical illness, chronic conditions, or an accident.
Unfortunately, all insurance agents aren't created equal. Some of them are so focused on making a sale that they fail to reveal certain necessary information, tell you about discounts available, or clearly explain the process. Pradeep Bhatto and his team at PKA Insurance Group are different. They have a reputation of putting people over profits and always doing what's best.
If you need life insurance or disability insurance, reach out to Pradeep and his team today. They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve.